The snow fell like forgotten promises over Manhattan that Christmas Eve, each flake catching the glow of a million lights before vanishing into the darkness below. Marcus Sterling stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse office, watching the city transform beneath its white shroud. At 55, he commanded an empire of steel and glass, his reflection in the window showing a man who had conquered everything except the silence that followed him home each night. The Sterling Holding Holiday Gala continued 40 floors below, a glittering celebration of another record-breaking year. Marcus had made his appearance, delivered his speech about market projections and corporate excellence, then slipped away before the second round of champagne. No one questioned his departure. After 2 decades at the helm, his patterns were as fixed as the Manhattan skyline. His phone buzzed with messages he wouldn't read tonight. Board members sharing holiday pleasantries, executives angling for post-holiday meetings, invitations to gatherings where his presence would be noted, but not missed. He switched the device to silent and placed it face down on his desk, next to the photograph he still couldn't bring himself to remove. Lily smiled back at him from behind the glass. Forever frozen at 6 years old, her gap-toothed grin captured 3 days before the accident that had stolen her from him. 20 years had passed since that drunk driver ran the red light, yet some nights he still heard her laughter echoing through these empty rooms, still felt the phantom weight of her small hand in his. The penthouse sprawled across the building's top 2 floors, 8,000 square feet of marble and mahogany that had graced the covers of 3 architectural magazines. Every surface gleamed under the soft lighting, every piece of furniture positioned with mathematical precision. The cleaning staff had left 2 hours ago, leaving behind the scent of lemon polish and the kind of pristine order that only existed in spaces where no one truly lived. Marcus poured himself 2 fingers of scotch from the crystal decanter, a 30-year-old single malt that cost more than most people's monthly rent. The first sip burned familiar paths down his throat as he moved through rooms that felt more like a museum than a home. The formal dining room with its table for 16 had hosted exactly 1 dinner in the past 5 years. The library held first editions he'd never opened. The media room's leather recliners had molded to no one's form. In what the decorator had called the family room, a professionally trimmed tree stood sentinel by the window. The ornaments were crystal and gold, each one perfectly spaced. The white lights programmed to fade in and out in a pattern some designer had deemed sophisticated. Marcus paused before it, remembering other trees, crooked and overloaded with handmade decorations. Lily's construction paper angels held up with too much glue. He'd built this empire for her, every acquisition and merger driven by a father's desire to give his daughter the world. After the divorce, after the custody battles that had limited him to weekends and alternating holidays, work became his way of showing love. Each success was supposed to guarantee her future, ensure she'd never want for anything. But futures could be erased by drunk drivers, and all the money in the world couldn't buy back a single moment. The elevator chimed softly, his private car arriving at the penthouse. Marcus set down his glass and retrieved his coat from the closet. Cashmere, tailored in London, it settled across his shoulders like armor against the December cold. He couldn't spend another minute in this beautiful tomb, surrounded by the ghosts of a life that might have been. Outside, the snow had intensified, transforming Fifth Avenue into something from a snow globe. The doorman, Robert, tipped his cap as Marcus emerged. They'd worked out their routine years ago. No small talk, no false cheer, just professional acknowledgement between 2 men doing their jobs. Marcus pressed a thick envelope into Robert's gloved hand, the annual Christmas bonus that would cover the man's grandson's spring tuition. "Merry Christmas, Mr. Sterling." "Merry Christmas, Robert." The sidewalk still bustled despite the late hour and weather. Tourists posed for photos beneath the elaborate window displays, their laughter misting in the cold air. Couples walked arm in arm, shopping bags swinging between them. A Salvation Army bell ringer stood at the corner, his red kettle slowly filling with donations from passing strangers who still believed in the season's magic. Marcus walked without destination, his Italian leather shoes leaving precise prints in the accumulating snow. He'd learned long ago that movement helped quiet the noise in his head, that the rhythm of walking could sometimes outdistance memory. But tonight the ghost kept pace, whispering of bedtime stories never finished and ballet recitals never attended. He turned east on 57th Street, leaving the crowds behind as he entered the maze of smaller streets that cut through Midtown. Here the city showed different faces. Between the towers of wealth, older buildings huddled like forgotten relatives at a family gathering. The snow muffled the usual urban symphony, creating pockets of unexpected quiet where a man could hear his own thoughts too clearly. It was in one of these forgotten corners, where a narrow alley cut between a shuttered print shop and a parking garage, that Marcus heard the sound. At first he thought it was a cat, the thin cry barely audible above the wind. But as he paused at the alley's mouth, the sound came again, distinctly human and desperately small. The alley stretched back into darkness, lit only by the weak glow of a security light halfway down its length. Dumpsters lined one wall, overflow from the restaurants that faced the next street. The smell of rotting food mixed with the metallic tang of snow, creating an atmosphere that belonged to a different city than the one Marcus inhabited. He should have walked on. Every urban instinct screamed caution, warned against entering dark alleys alone at night. But the sound came again, weaker now, and something in its fading quality reached past his defenses. Marcus pulled out his phone, activated the flashlight, and stepped into the shadows. The beam swept across wet brick and graffitied metal before finding the source. At first, his mind refused to process what he saw, tried to rearrange the image into something that made sense. But reality insisted on its truth. There, nestled between two overflowing garbage bags, lay a child. She couldn't have been more than 6 or 7, her small body curled into itself for warmth that wouldn't come. A thin coat, several sizes too large, served as both clothing and blanket. One arm clutched a stuffed rabbit so worn its original color was lost to time and handling. Her face, what he could see of it beneath tangled dark hair, was flushed with fever, her lips moving in delirious whispers. Marcus dropped to his knees, heedless of the snow and garbage juice soaking through his $1,000 pants. Up close, he could see her breathing, shallow and labored, each exhale creating tiny clouds that disappeared too quickly. When he touched her forehead, the heat shocked him. This wasn't the warmth of sleep, but the dangerous fire of serious illness. "Can you hear me?" His voice cracked on the words. "I'm here to help." Her eyes fluttered open, hazel like Lily's had been, but clouded with fever and confusion. For a moment she stared at him without recognition, then her cracked lips formed words he had to lean close to hear. "I just wanted to see the holiday lights, like Mommy promised, before I sleep." The words hit Marcus like physical blows. He saw Lily in this child's fevered gaze, saw every sick night he'd missed, every promise work had forced him to break. But Lily was gone, had been gone for 20 years, and this child was here, now dying in an alley while the city celebrated around them. "The lights are still there," he heard himself say, his voice steady despite the earthquake in his chest. "They're waiting for you, but first we need to get you warm." She tried to smile, the expression heartbreaking on her fevered face. "Too tired. Just need to rest. Then I'll go see them." "No." The word came out harsher than intended, powered by a fear he hadn't felt in decades. "No sleeping here. Come on, sweetheart." Marcus stripped off his coat, wrapping it around her small form. When he lifted her, she weighed almost nothing, as if fever had burned away everything but will. The stuffed rabbit tumbled from her grip, and she made a weak sound of protest. "Bunny. Need Bunny." He retrieved the toy, its matted fur testament to how long she'd been exposed to the elements. "I've got him. He's safe." The journey back to the street felt endless, each step careful on the slick ground. She burned against his chest, her head lolling against his shoulder. He could feel her heartbeat, too fast, too light, a bird trapped in a cage of fever. On the sidewalk, Marcus looked wildly for a taxi. The snow had driven most off the streets, and those that passed were already occupied. Panic clawed at his throat. The nearest hospital was 15 blocks away, too far to walk with a sick child in a blizzard. Then Providence intervened in the form of a police cruiser turning the corner. Marcus stepped into the street, free arm waving desperately. The cruiser's brakes engaged, sliding slightly on the fresh snow before coming to a stop. "Help!" Marcus shouted as the window rolled down. "This child needs a hospital immediately." The officer, a young woman with kind eyes, took in the scene in an instant. The well-dressed man holding a bundled child, the desperation in his voice, the fever-flushed face barely visible within the expensive coat. "Get in," she commanded, already reaching for her radio. "Mount Sinai is closest." The ride blurred past in a chaos of sirens and radio chatter. Marcus held the girl tight, murmuring nonsense comfort as the officer wove through traffic with practiced ear. The child's whispers had stopped, her body limp except for the rapid rise and fall of her chest. "What's her name?" the officer asked, eyes meeting his in the mirror. "I don't know. I found her in an alley off 57th. Parents? No one. She was alone." The officer's jaw tightened as she pressed harder on the accelerator. Marcus understood her anger. In a city of such wealth, no child should be dying alone in the cold. Yet here they were, racing against time and fever, while festive displays twinkled mockingly through the snow-covered windows. Mount Sinai's emergency entrance appeared through the white curtain of snow, its lights a beacon of hope. The officer pulled directly to the doors, ignoring the usual protocols. Medical staff, alerted by radio, waited with a gurney. "Pediatric emergency," the officer announced as they transferred the small form. "Found alone, exposed to elements, high fever, semi-conscious." The medical team moved with choreographed efficiency, whisking her through doors marked authorized personnel only. Marcus tried to follow, but a firm hand stopped him. "Sir, I need you to wait here. Let them work." He stood in the sudden quiet of the waiting area, his coat gone with the child, his shirt damp with sweat and snow. Other patients and families occupied the plastic chairs, their own dramas playing out beneath the fluorescent lights. A television mounted in the corner showed a weather report promising 8 inches by morning. The officer appeared at his elbow, notepad in hand. "I need to ask you some questions." Marcus answered mechanically, his attention fixed on the doors that had swallowed the child. "Found her in an alley. No, didn't know her. No, hadn't seen anyone else. Yes, he'd wait to give a full statement." "You did the right thing," the officer said finally, her voice softer. "Most people would have walked past." Most nights, Marcus thought, he would have been most people. But something about tonight, about the snow and the silence and the ghost of his daughter's smile, had changed the equation. He found an empty chair and settled in to wait, the stuffed rabbit still clutched in his hands. Time moved differently in hospitals, measured not in minutes but in the space between heartbeats. Marcus had forgotten this truth, though he'd lived it for 3 days 20 years ago, waiting for news that never got better. The coffee from the vending machine tasted like liquid cardboard. The chairs were designed by someone who'd never had to sit in them for hours. The fluorescent lights hummed with a frequency that seemed to resonate in his bones. He called his office, leaving a message that he wouldn't be reachable. Let them wonder. Let the empire run itself for one night. His entire focus narrowed to the set of double doors and the child fighting for life behind them. An hour passed, then 2. The officer had long since left to continue her patrol, extracting a promise that he'd remain to provide any additional information needed. Other emergencies came and went. A man with a broken arm, a woman in labor, a teenager with alcohol poisoning. The city's pain parading past while Marcus waited for news of one small girl who'd wanted nothing more than to see the city's festive glow. Finally, a doctor emerged, her scrubs rumpled, her face wearing the careful neutrality medical professionals perfected. She scanned the waiting room until Marcus stood, the rabbit still in his hands. "You brought in the little girl?" "Yes, is she—" He couldn't finish the question. "She's stable. Severe pneumonia, dehydration, malnutrition. She's very sick, but she's a fighter." The doctor's expression softened slightly. "You saved her life. Another hour in that cold." Marcus's knees went weak with relief. "Can I see her?" "She's sedated, on oxygen and IV antibiotics. But yes, you can see her briefly." The pediatric ICU was a world apart from the chaos of emergency. Here, machines beeped in digital lullabies while children fought battles too big for their small bodies. The doctor led him to a corner bed where the girl lay surrounded by more equipment than person. They'd cleaned her up, revealing delicate features beneath the dirt and fever. Dark hair spread across the white pillow. The oversized hospital gown made her look even smaller. Various tubes and wires connected her to the machines, keeping vigilant watch. But she was breathing steadily, the dangerous flush fading from her cheeks. "No identification," the doctor said quietly. No missing child reports matching her description. Social services will be here in the morning. Marcus approached the bed slowly, afraid to disturb the fragile peace. He placed the stuffed rabbit near her hand, where she'd find it when she woke. In sleep, without the fever's torment, she looked peaceful. He found himself memorizing her face, the curve of her cheek, the way her lashes cast shadows on her skin. What happens to her now, he asked. She'll need to stay here at least a week, maybe more. After that, the doctor shrugged. Foster care, most likely, unless family comes forward. The word foster hit like cold water. Marcus knew the statistics, had funded charity dinners where well-meaning people discussed the crisis in abstract terms. But this wasn't abstract. This was a child who'd nearly died alone, who'd wake up on Christmas morning in a hospital bed with no one who knew her name. I'll stay, he heard himself say. The doctor looked surprised. Visiting hours? I'll stay, he repeated more firmly. Someone should be here when she wakes up, so she's not alone. The doctor studied him for a long moment, taking in his disheveled appearance, the determination in his eyes. Finally, she nodded. I'll have a nurse bring you a chair. And so Marcus Sterling, master of leveraged buyouts and hostile takeovers, spent Christmas Eve in a plastic chair beside a stranger's child. He watched the monitors trace her vital signs, learning their rhythms like a new language. When she stirred, whimpering in her sleep, he found himself humming lullabies he'd thought forgotten, songs from another life, when he'd believed in forever. The night stretched on, punctuated by nurse visits and the distant sounds of the hospital's never-ending activity. Through the window, snow continued to fall, blanketing the city in temporary innocence. Somewhere out there, families gathered around trees and tables, sharing warmth he'd forgotten how to feel. But here, in this sterile room with its mechanical symphonies, something long frozen began to thaw. As dawn approached, painting the sky a pale pink above the white city, the girl's eyes fluttered open. For a moment, she stared at the unfamiliar ceiling, confusion clouding her features. Then her gaze found Marcus, still keeping watch in his wrinkled shirt and day-old stubble. The lights, she whispered, her voice rough but clearer than before. Did I miss them? Marcus leaned forward, his voice gentle. No, sweetheart. They're still waiting for you, Astu. All of them. Every single light in the city is waiting for you to get better so you can see them. A tiny smile curved her lips. You stayed. I stayed. Nobody ever stays. The words carried a weight no child should bear. Except Mommy, but she couldn't it anymore. Marcus's throat tightened. What's your name? Emma. She noticed the rabbit then, reaching for it with a glad cry. You saved Bunny too. Of course, he was very brave, just like you. Emma hugged the rabbit close, studying Marcus with those serious hazel eyes. What's your name? Marcus. Marcus. She tested the name carefully. That's a strong name. Her eyes began to drift closed again, exhaustion pulling her back toward sleep. Will you still be here when I wake up? The question hung in the antiseptic air, carrying more weight than she could know. Marcus thought of the empire waiting for him, the meetings scheduled, the deals pending. He thought of his empty penthouse and the ghost of a daughter he couldn't save. He thought of an alley where a child had nearly died while the city celebrated, and of promises too easily broken. Yes, Emma, he said, meaning it with every fiber of his being. I'll still be here. As she drifted back to sleep, her small hand found his, holding on with surprising strength. Marcus sat back in his uncomfortable chair, watching the sun rise over Manhattan through the hospital window. Somewhere in the city, church bells began to ring, announcing Christmas morning to a world transformed by snow. He'd walked out of that gala searching for something he couldn't name, driven by a loneliness that success couldn't cure. In the most unexpected place, in the smallest of lives, he'd found something he'd thought lost forever. Not redemption exactly, but possibility. The chance to be more than the sum of his failures. The machines continued their electronic lullabies. Emma slept, her breathing steady and deep, and Marcus Sterling, billionaire orphan of his own making, held a stranger's child's hand and remembered what it felt like to matter. The morning after Christmas brought bureaucracy wrapped in good intentions. Marcus had dozed fitfully in the hospital chair, waking each time Emma stirred or a nurse entered to check vitals. By 8 o'clock, the pediatric ward buzzed with shift changes and breakfast trays, the efficient machinery of healing grinding into motion. Dr. Catherine Ross, the attending physician who'd taken over Emma's care, reviewed the chart with practiced eyes. She was younger than Marcus had expected, perhaps early 40s, with the kind of calm competence that came from years of watching children fight battles they shouldn't have to face. Her fever broke around 6, she reported, checking the monitors. The antibiotics are working, but she's severely malnourished. Based on the x-rays, this isn't her first bout with pneumonia. She's been sick before without proper treatment. Marcus absorbed this information, each detail adding weight to the story Emma hadn't yet told. What's the prognosis? With proper care, full recovery, she'll need to stay at least a week, possibly 2. After that, Dr. Ross paused, choosing her words carefully. That depends on what social services determines. As if summoned by the mention of her department, Janet Morrison appeared in the doorway. Middle-aged and efficient, she carried the weight of too many cases in the lines around her eyes and the stack of folders clutched against her chest. Her gaze swept the room, cataloging details. The expensive clothes draped over the chair back, Marcus's disheveled appearance, the way Emma's hand still rested near his on the bed rail. "Mr. Sterling, I'm Janet Morrison from Child Protective Services. I understand you found Emma last night?" Marcus stood, his body protesting after hours in the plastic chair. "Yes, in an alley off 57th Street. Janet's expression softened slightly. "The officers spoke highly of your quick action. You saved her life." She glanced at Emma, still sleeping. "Has she said anything about family? Where she's been staying?" "Only that her mother couldn't be here anymore. She's mentioned her several times." Janet made notes in a worn notebook. "We'll run her information through the system, check for any reports. Sometimes children slip through cracks, especially if they have been moving around." She paused, studying Marcus with professional curiosity. "The nurses tell me you've been here all night. Someone should be here when she wakes up." "That's kind, but—" Janet seemed to be choosing her words carefully. "You understand I have to ask, do you know this child? Any connection we should be aware of?" "No, I'd never seen her before last night." "And you're here because?" The question hung in the air, deceptively simple yet impossible to answer fully. "Because she has my daughter's eyes? Because I know what it's like to wake up alone and afraid? Because 20 years of success haven't filled the hole where love used to live? Because she needs someone," Marcus said simply. Janet nodded slowly, making more notes. "I'll need a full statement, but that can wait. For now, I need to make some calls, see what we can find out. She'll be assigned a caseworker who'll visit daily." She handed him a business card. "If she tells you anything about family or where she's been staying, please call immediately." After Janet left, Marcus turned back to find Emma awake, watching him with those serious eyes. In daylight, without fever clouding her features, he could see her more clearly. She was beautiful in the way all children were, with potential written in the curve of her cheek and the brightness barely dimmed by hardship. But there was something else too, a wariness that spoke of too many broken promises. "You're still here," she said, wonder coloring her voice. "I told you I would be." Emma considered this, hugging Bunny closer. "People say that sometimes, but then morning comes and they have important things to do. What's more important than making sure you're okay?" She studied him with an intensity that would have been unsettling in an adult. "Don't you have work?" "Mommy always had to go to work, even when she was tired. She said that's how we kept our room." "Tell me about your mommy," Marcus said gently, settling back into the chair. Emma's face lit up, then dimmed. "She was the best mommy. Her name was Sarah, Sarah Sterling. She always said we were Sterling, like the silver but stronger. You know, she worked at a hospital. Not this one, a different one. Presbyterian. She wore blue scrubs and helped sick people." Marcus felt his chest tighten at the coincidence. Sterling. This child carried his last name, though they shared no blood. "She sounds wonderful." "She was. She used to sing while she cooked, even when she was sad, and she'd tell me stories about brave princesses who saved themselves. She said I was her brave princess." Emma's voice dropped to a whisper. "But then she got sick. Really sick. The kind where your hair falls out and you can't eat food anymore." The picture became clearer with each word. A single mother, a nurse, fighting cancer while trying to raise a daughter. Marcus knew the statistics on medical bankruptcy, how quickly illness could destroy a family's stability. She tried to keep working, Emma continued, her small fingers whirring at Bunny's ear. But then she couldn't. We had to leave our apartment. We stayed with her friend for a while, then in a place with lots of beds where you had to leave during the day. Mommy said it was an adventure, but I could tell she was scared. When did she? Marcus couldn't finish the question. 2 months ago, October 15th, a Wednesday, she went to sleep at the hospital and didn't wake up. Emma's voice remained steady, but tears slipped down her cheeks. The lady at the shelter said I had to go with some people, but I heard them talking. They were going to separate me and Bunny, put us in different places. So I ran. You've been alone since then? Emma nodded. Sometimes people help. A man at the sandwich shop gives me old bread. The library is warm until it closes. I know which churches have soup kitchens on which days. She recited this survival guide matter-of-factly, a 6-year-old discussing things no child should know. I was doing okay until I got sick. Then it got harder to stay warm. Marcus struggled to keep his expression neutral while inside fury warred with heartbreak. In one of the wealthiest cities in the world, a child had been living on the streets for 2 months, invisible to everyone who mattered. Why were you in that alley? He asked softly. I was trying to get to the big tree on 5th Avenue to see the decorations. Mommy and I went every year. We'd stand under the star and make wishes. Her voice broke. I thought maybe if I went there, if I wished hard enough, she'd find me, but I got so tired, and it was so cold. Before Marcus could respond, a nurse arrived with breakfast. The standard hospital fare looked unappetizing, even by institutional standards. But Emma's eyes widened as if seeing a feast. She ate slowly, savoring each bite of scrambled eggs and toast, making Marcus wonder when she'd last had a hot meal. Dar Ross returned for rounds, checking Emma's lungs and reviewing her medications. Much better, she pronounced. The antibiotics are doing their job. You're a tough little fighter, aren't you? Emma nodded solemnly. Mommy said Sterling girls don't give up. The morning progressed in a parade of medical professionals. Respiratory therapists to help Emma's breathing, nurses to monitor medications, technicians drawing blood for tests. Through it all, Marcus remained, stepping aside when needed, but always within Emma's line of sight. She seemed to draw comfort from his presence, her eyes tracking to him whenever someone new entered the room. Around noon, while Emma napped, Marcus stepped into the hallway to check his phone. 47 missed calls, over 100 emails. The Empire demanding his attention. Board members wondering about his absence from the morning's scheduled conference call. He scrolled through them without interest. These urgent matters that had seemed so important yesterday now revealed as hollow exercises in accumulating more of what he already had too much of. Mr. Sterling? He turned to find Janet Morrison approaching, her expression thoughtful. I've done some checking. Emma's story checks out. Sarah Sterling, age 32, died at Presbyterian 2 months ago. Pancreatic cancer. No insurance beyond basic Medicaid. She listed no next of kin for Emma. She consulted her notes. We're running searches for extended family, but so far nothing. What happens if you can't find anyone? Foster care, once she's medically cleared. We'll try to find a good placement, but... Janet shrugged helplessly. The system is overwhelmed. Children Emma's age usually do okay, but the trauma she's experienced, the attachment issues, it won't be easy. Marcus thought of Emma's eyes when she'd said nobody ever stays. Can I visit her while she's here? Janet studied him carefully. That's kind of you, but I need to caution you. These children, they form attachments quickly, especially after trauma. If you're not planning to be a permanent presence in her life, it might be kinder. I understand, Marcus said, though he wasn't sure he did. Nothing about this situation fit into the carefully ordered life he'd built. Yet the thought of walking away, of becoming another person who didn't stay, felt impossible. He returned to find Emma awake, drawing on a pad a nurse had brought. Her tongue poked out in concentration as she worked, reminding him so powerfully of Lily at that age that he had to pause in the doorway to compose himself. What are you drawing? She held up the paper shyly. Despite the IV in her arm and the oxygen cannula, she'd drawn herself standing before a decorated tree, holding hands with a tall figure in a dark coat. Above them, she'd added a yellow sun with a smiling face. "That's you," she said, pointing to the tall figure. "And that's me when I'm better. And see, the sun is happy because we're together." Marcus accepted the drawing with hands that trembled slightly. In 20 years of board meetings and billion-dollar deals, nothing had moved him like this child's simple art. "It's beautiful. May I keep it?" Emma nodded eagerly. "I can make more. The nurse said I can have lots of paper." She paused, then asked in a smaller voice, "How long can you stay today?" The question pierced him. She was already preparing for him to leave, already steeling herself for another disappointment. He thought of the meetings waiting, the deals pending, the empire requiring its emperor. Then he looked at this small girl who'd survived 2 months on the streets, who'd nearly died alone rather than trust a system that had failed her, who still believed in wishes despite having every reason not to. "How about I stay until you get tired of me?" he said. Emma's smile transformed her face. "That might be a really long time." "I'm counting on it." The afternoon passed in a blur of small moments that somehow felt larger than any acquisition he'd ever orchestrated. Emma told him about her favorite books, mostly fairy tales her mother had read until the pages were soft. She demonstrated how Bunny liked to be held, very specific instructions delivered with 6-year-old seriousness. She asked about his work, and he found himself explaining real estate in terms of building homes for families, simplifying his empire into something a child could understand, and perhaps something he could remember mattered. "Do you build castles?" she asked. "Sometimes. Very tall ones made of glass and steel. I'd like to see one someday, from the inside, not just walking past." "I'll show you the best one," Marcus promised. "It has windows so high you can see the whole city." As evening approached, Emma grew quiet. The excitement of the day caught up with her weakened body, and she curled into the hospital bed seeking shelter. Marcus could see her fighting sleep, afraid perhaps that he'd disappear if she closed her eyes. "I'll be here," he assured her. "Sleep. You need to rest to get strong." "Promise?" The word came out slurred with exhaustion. "I promise." She fell asleep clutching Bunny, her other hand loosely holding Marcus's finger. He sat in the gathering darkness, watching her breathe, each steady rise and fall a small miracle. Through the window, Manhattan's lights began their nightly show, millions of lives illuminated against the winter sky. But here, in this small room with its mechanical lullabies and antiseptic smell, Marcus felt more connected to humanity than he had in 20 years of success. His phone buzzed, a text from his CFO, "Board demanding explanation for your absence. What should I tell them?" Marcus typed back one-handed, unwilling to disturb Emma's grip. "Tell them I'm attending to a critical acquisition." It wasn't a lie. Sitting there in the dark, holding a stranger's child's hand, Marcus Sterling was acquiring something he had lost so long ago he'd forgotten its name. Purpose beyond profit, connection beyond contracts, the terrifying, exhilarating possibility of mattering to someone who needed him. The night nurse arrived for vitals, moving quietly around the sleeping child. She smiled at Marcus. "Haven't moved all day, have you?" "Couldn't think of anywhere else I'd rather be." The nurse checked Emma's temperature, nodding approvingly. "Fever's staying down. She's doing well." She paused, then added softly, "She's lucky to have you. Whatever your connection, she's lucky." After she left, Marcus sat in the darkness, Emma's drawing carefully folded in his shirt pocket. He thought about luck and chance, about the threads that connected strangers in a city of millions. If he hadn't left the gala early, if he'd taken a different route, if he'd ignored the sound in that alley. But he hadn't. He'd found her, or perhaps she'd found him. Either way, something had shifted in the universe, creating possibilities where none had existed before. Tomorrow would bring complications, social workers and protocols, legal questions and practical concerns. The machinery of bureaucracy would engage, trying to fit Emma into boxes that couldn't contain a spirit that had survived such loss. But tonight in this quiet room, none of that mattered. There was only a little girl who needed someone to stay, and a man who'd forgotten he could be needed. It wasn't redemption, not yet, but it was a beginning. As midnight approached, Marcus felt his phone buzz again. This time it was his lawyer, probably calling about the Singapore merger. He let it go to voicemail. Singapore would still be there tomorrow. The merger would wait. The empire would survive one night without its emperor. Emma stirred in her sleep, whimpering softly. Without thinking, Marcus began to hum, the same lullaby he'd hummed the night before. She settled, her face smoothing back into peaceful rest. He continued humming, songs he'd thought forgotten, rising from some deep well of memory. Songs from another life, when he'd believed in forever, and love was as simple as a child's hand in his. Somewhere in the city, church bells chimed midnight. December 26th arrived without fanfare, just another date on the calendar. But for Marcus Sterling, sitting vigil beside a child who'd taught him that staying could be its own form of salvation, it felt like the first day of something entirely new. The days that followed blurred into a routine Marcus had never expected to embrace. Each morning he arrived at the hospital before Emma woke, bearing fresh fruit from the expensive market near his penthouse and children's books hastily purchased from the gift shop. Each evening he stayed until she fell asleep, his presence as constant as the monitors marking her steady improvement. His absence from Sterling Holdings did not go unnoticed. Board members called with increasing urgency. Deals languished unsigned on his desk. The Singapore merger teetered on the edge of collapse. Marcus delegated what he could and ignored what he couldn't, his entire world condensing to the size of a hospital room where a little girl was slowly returning to life. On the fourth day, Dr. Ross pulled him aside. Her recovery is remarkable. Children are resilient, but this? She shook her head in wonder. Having someone here, someone she trusts, it's made all the difference. Has CPS found any family? They're still looking, Marcus said, though he knew Janet Morrison's search had expanded to include distant relatives and family friends, anyone who might claim Emma before she entered the foster system. And you, have you thought about what happens when she's discharged? The question haunted him. Each night he returned to his penthouse, the space feeling larger and emptier than ever. He'd catch himself buying children's books, researching child psychology, planning outings to show Emma the city she'd survived. But what right did he have to insert himself into her life? He was a stranger who'd found her in an alley. Nothing more. Except he was more. With each passing day, the connection deepened. Emma told him stories about her mother, painting a picture of a woman who'd fought impossible odds with grace and humor. She showed him the contents of the small bag that had been found with her. 3 photographs, a broken compass her mother had called their adventure guide, and a folded paper with handwritten quotes about bravery and hope. Mommy said if we ever got separated, I should be brave like the princesses in stories, Emma explained, carefully smoothing the worn paper. She wrote these down so I wouldn't forget. Marcus read the quotes, written in a shaky hand that spoke of illness fought with determination. Your mom was very wise. The wisest, Emma agreed solemnly. Then with the subject-changing speed of childhood, can you teach me to tie shoes? Mine have Velcro, but the pretty shoes all have laces. So Marcus found himself demonstrating shoe tying with the laces from his own Italian Oxfords, Emma giggling as his fingers fumbled with explanations. It was during one of these lessons that Janet Morrison arrived with news that changed everything. We found her, she announced, her expression unreadable. Linda Hayes in Sacramento. She's Emma's maternal aunt. Marcus felt the words like a physical blow. Beside him, Emma had gone very still. She's flying in tomorrow, Janet continued. She was surprised to hear about Emma. Apparently she and Sarah had been estranged for years, but she's willing to take custody. Willing? Marcus couldn't keep the edge from his voice. Janet's professional mask slipped slightly. She seemed more interested in whether there was any insurance money or death benefits. But she is family, and unless we find evidence of unfitness, I don't want to go with her, Emma whispered, her voice tiny. I don't know her. Mommy never talked about her. Sweetie, I know this is scary, Janet said gently, but your aunt is your family. She wants to take care of you. Emma shook her head violently, tears streaming. No, she doesn't want me. Nobody ever wants me. They just have to take me. She turned to Marcus, her eyes desperate. Please don't let them take me. Please. I'll be good, I promise. I'll be so good. Marcus gathered her into his arms, feeling her small body shake with sobs. Over her head, he met Janet's eyes. What are the alternatives? Unless someone else petitions for custody, Janet trailed off meaningfully. I'll need a lawyer. Janet studied him for a long moment. Are you sure? This isn't a decision to make lightly. The court will examine every aspect of your life. A single man, no matter how wealthy, seeking custody of an unrelated child, it won't be easy. When has anything worth doing been easy? That night, after Emma had cried herself to sleep, Marcus made 2 calls. The first was to Catherine Chen, the best family lawyer in the city. The second was to his CFO. I need you to handle Singapore, he said without preamble. Full authority to negotiate on my behalf. Marcus, what's going on? The board is in revolt. There are rumors. Let them revolt. Let them rumor. I have something more important to attend to. More important than a $2 billion merger? Marcus looked through the doorway at Emma, sleeping fitfully in the hospital bed. Yes. The next morning brought Linda Hayes, and with her, Marcus's first real understanding of what they were facing. She arrived late, reeking of cigarette smoke and yesterday's alcohol, her bleached hair showing dark roots and her clothes wrinkled as if she'd slept in them. Where is she? Linda demanded, her voice too loud for the pediatric ward. Where's my sister's kid? Emma pressed herself against Marcus's side, trembling. He kept his hand steady on her shoulder, though rage boiled inside him at this woman who looked at Emma and saw only an obligation. You must be Linda, Janet said professionally. I'm Janet Morrison from CPS. Thank you for coming. Yeah, well, somebody had to, right? Linda's bloodshot eyes swept the room, pausing on Marcus. Who's this? This is Mr. Sterling. He found Emma and has been visiting during her recovery. Linda snorted. Sterling? Like Sarah always going on about sterling silver and sterling character? Christ, she never could let go of those fairy tales. She finally looked at Emma, her expression softening marginally. You look like her, like Sarah when she was little. You knew my mommy when she was little? Emma asked tentatively. Yeah, I knew her. Perfect Sarah, always doing everything right, always making the rest of us look bad. The bitterness in Linda's voice could have curdled milk. Guess she wasn't so perfect after all, ending up like this. Mrs. Hayes, Janet intervened, perhaps we could speak privately about the arrangements? As they moved toward the hallway, Linda turned back. Kid comes with me tomorrow, right? I got work to get back to. Can't be hanging around New York forever. After she left, Emma was inconsolable. She hates me, she sobbed. She hated Mommy and she hates me too. She doesn't hate you, Marcus said, though he wasn't sure he believed it. She's just surprised. This is all new for her. I don't want to go to California. I don't want to leave. Emma clutched Bunny desperately. What if I never see you again? The fear in her voice decided him. Whatever legal battles lay ahead, whatever Linda Hayes might do, he couldn't let Emma face it alone. You'll see me again, he promised. No matter what happens, I'll make sure of that. That afternoon, while Emma napped, Marcus met with Catherine Chen. She was everything her reputation promised. Brilliant, thorough, and brutally honest. A custody battle with a blood relative will be ugly, she warned. They'll investigate everything. Your finances, your relationships, your past, the fact that you lost a daughter. They'll use that against you. Let them. Catherine leaned forward. Marcus, I need you to understand. Linda Hayes may not be ideal, but she's family. The court's preference is always to keep children with blood relatives. You'll need to prove not just that you can provide a good home, but that she can't. Are you prepared for that? Marcus thought of Emma's terror, of Linda's bloodshot eyes and bitter words. I'm prepared to do whatever it takes, even if it takes months, even if it means your business suffers. The business has consumed 20 years of my life. It can spare a few months. Catherine nodded slowly. All right, I'll file the petition for temporary custody immediately, citing the existing bond and Emma's express preferences. We'll need character witnesses, home studies, psychological evaluations. And Marcus? She paused. You'll need to be perfect. Any mistake, any moment of doubt, and we lose. That evening, Marcus returned to find Emma sitting up in bed, her face grave beyond her years. Are you really going to try to keep me? She asked without preamble. Yes. Even though I'm not yours? Marcus sat on the edge of the bed, choosing his words carefully. Emma, families aren't always made by blood. Sometimes they're made by choice, by people who decide to care for each other no matter what. Is that what we are? A family? The word hung in the air, fragile as spun glass. Would you like us to be? Emma nodded slowly, then threw her arms around his neck. I choose you, she whispered. I choose you to be my family. Holding her, Marcus felt the last walls around his heart crumble. He'd built an empire on the principle of calculated risk, never investing more than he could afford to lose. But this little girl had changed the equation. For the first time in 20 years, he was all in, risking everything on the possibility of love. The legal machinery engaged with stunning speed. Catherine filed petitions, scheduled hearings, arranged for expedited home studies. Linda, faced with the prospect of a lengthy court battle, hired her own lawyer, a public defender who seemed more interested in a quick resolution than Emma's welfare. Through it all, Emma remained in the hospital, her recovery slowed by the stress of uncertainty. Some days she was bright and hopeful, drawing pictures of the apartment she and Marcus would share, complete with a special shelf for Bunny and windows to see the stars. Other days she retreated into silence, as if preparing herself for another loss. On one particularly difficult evening, after Linda had visited and spent the entire time complaining about missing work, Emma asked the question Marcus had been dreading. What if the judge says I have to go with her? Marcus wanted to lie, to promise everything would work out. But Emma had been lied to by life too often already. Then I'll make sure you have my phone number, my address, everything you need to reach me. And I'll call you every day, visit whenever I can. I won't disappear, Emma. No matter what happens, I won't disappear. Promise? I promise. She studied him with those two wise eyes. Okay, because even if I have to go with her, you'll still my chosen family. She can't change that. As the first week ended and the second began, the battle lines were drawn. Linda wanted quick custody and whatever financial support she could extract. Catherine wanted comprehensive evaluations and time to build their case. And in the middle, a little girl waited to learn where she would call home. But in the quiet moments when the lawyers were gone and the social workers had finished their questions, there was just Marcus and Emma building something that transcended legal definitions. He read to her from the fairy tales she loved, stories of brave princesses and magical kingdoms where love conquered all. She taught him to see the city through her eyes, finding beauty in the way snow gathered on windowsills and magic in the patterns of light on the hospital ceiling. Mommy said love is the only magic that's real, Emma told him one evening, arranging her growing collection of drawings. She said it can't fix everything, but it makes the broken things bearable. Marcus thought of his own broken things, the 20 years of emptiness he'd tried to fill with success. Your mom was right. She usually was, Emma agreed. I think she would have liked you. You're both sterling, strong like silver, but warmer. And in that moment, Marcus understood that this wasn't about saving Emma anymore. Somewhere between that snowy alley and this hospital room, between terror and trust, she had saved him. The question now was whether the law would let them save each other. The morning of January 15th dawned clear and bright, the kind of winter day that made the city sparkle like a diamond. Marcus dressed carefully in his best suit, then helped Emma into the navy dress Catherine had chosen. Appropriate but not ostentatious, childlike but serious. Do I look okay? Emma asked nervously, smoothing the skirt. You look perfect, like the brave princess you are. The courthouse loomed like a fortress of justice, its steps crowded with lawyers and litigants pursuing their own dramas. Inside, the family court section hummed with controlled chaos. Catherine led them through security and up to the third floor, where Judge Mitchell presided. Linda was already there, surprisingly sober, dressed in an ill-fitting suit that couldn't hide the tremor in her hands. Her lawyer, looking harried, whispered urgently in her ear. She glanced at Emma once, then away, as if the sight burned. All rise for the Honorable Judge Carol Mitchell. Judge Mitchell was younger than Marcus had expected, perhaps 50, with kind eyes that missed nothing. She reviewed the files before her, the emergency custody order, the police reports, the home studies, the psychological evaluations. This is a difficult case, she began. We have a child who has suffered tremendous loss, 2 adults claiming custody, and decisions that will shape the rest of a young life. I've read all the reports, but I'd like to hear from the parties themselves. Ms. Hayes, we'll start with you. Linda stood unsteadily. What followed was a rambling justification that blamed everyone but herself. Sarah had cut her off. The system had failed her. Rich people like Marcus thought they could buy anything. She was Emma's blood. That should count for something. Blood relation is significant, Judge Mitchell agreed, but so is the welfare of the child. Mr. Sterling? Marcus stood, his prepared speech evaporating. Instead, he spoke from the heart, about finding Emma in the alley, about the hospital vigils, about watching her come back to life, about the drawings that now covered his refrigerator and the bedtime stories that had become sacred ritual. I'm not her blood, he concluded, but I am her choice and she is mine. Every day, forever, she is my choice. Judge Mitchell nodded thoughtfully. I'd like to speak with Emma, not in the witness box, just here informally. Is that acceptable to all parties? The lawyers agreed. Emma walked forward, bunny clutched for courage. She stood before the judge's bench, small but straight-backed. Hello, Emma. I'm Judge Mitchell. I know this is scary, but I need to ask you some questions. Is that okay? Emma nodded. Can you tell me about living with your aunt? Emma's voice was quiet but clear. She doesn't like me. She said so. She drinks the sad juice and then says mean things about mommy. She grabbed me hard and it hurt. And living with Mr. Sterling? Emma's face transformed. He reads to me every night. He taught me to tie shoes. He hung up all my pictures like they're important. He stays when I have bad dreams. He makes me feel safe. If you could choose where to live, what would you choose? Emma didn't hesitate. With Marcus, he's my family now. The kind you choose, not the kind you're stuck with. Judge Mitchell's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Thank you, Emma. You can go sit down now. What followed was legal argument, precedent cited, reports quoted. But Marcus could see something troubling in the way Catherine kept glancing at the prosecutor's table, where a man in a gray suit was whispering to the judge's clerk. New scene, false defeat. Judge Mitchell reviewed the files in silence, her expression unreadable. The courtroom held its breath. I need a 30-minute recess, she said finally. There are some matters I need to review privately. The gavel fell. Everyone stood as she left. Marcus felt his stomach drop. What does that mean? Catherine's face was pale. I don't know. Judges don't usually recess in custody hearings unless something's wrong. They waited in the hallway. Emma pressed against Marcus's side, sensing his tension. Linda smoked by the window, her hands shaking. Her lawyer looked worried. Catherine's phone rang. She stepped away, spoke in low tones, then returned with an expression Marcus had never seen before. Fear. The prosecutor's office just filed a motion. They're questioning whether you should have custody given your history. What history? Lily. They're arguing that a parent who lost a child through negligence. It wasn't negligence. Marcus's voice was ice. A drunk driver ran a red light. I know, but they're saying you weren't in the car. That Lily was with your ex-wife because you'd chosen to work that weekend instead of taking your custody time. They're arguing pattern of behavior, putting career over children. Marcus felt the world tilt. It was true. All of it. That weekend, there'd been an acquisition deal closing. He'd called Rebecca, asked her to keep Lily an extra 2 days. She'd agreed, taken Lily to a movie. They'd been T-boned by a drunk driver on the way home. If Marcus had taken his custody time like he was supposed to, Lily would have been with him, safe, alive. They can't use that, Catherine was saying. It's not relevant. It's true. Marcus's voice was hollow. Every word is true. Emma looked up at him, confused. What are they saying? How could he explain? How could he tell this little girl that he'd lost his daughter because he'd chosen work, and now the court might take her away because of it? Nothing, sweetheart, just lawyer things. But Emma was smart, too smart. They think you're a bad father, because of Lily. Yes. Are you? The question hung between them. Was he? He'd failed Lily. Let work consume him until the weekend he'd traded his daughter's life for a signature on a contract. 20 years of guilt, of knowing that his choice had killed her. I was, Marcus said quietly. I was so busy building an empire to give Lily the world, I forgot she just wanted her father. But I'm not that man anymore, Emma. You taught me that. You taught me what actually matters. Then tell them. Emma's voice was fierce. Tell the judge. Tell her you messed up before, but you won't mess up again. It's not that simple. Yes, it is. Emma took his hands. You stayed with me in the hospital when nobody ever stays. You lost your job because you chose me. You read to me every night and you teach me things and you make me feel safe. That's what fathers do. The judge needs to know that. The bailiff appeared. Court is resuming. They filed back in. Judge Mitchell looked tired, like she'd aged a decade in 30 minutes. I've reviewed the motion from the prosecutor's office regarding Mr. Sterling's history. I've also reviewed the extensive documentation of his commitment to Emma made over the past months. She paused. This is, without question, the most difficult decision I've made in 15 years on the bench. Marcus felt Emma's hand grip his so hard it hurt. On one hand, we have blood relation. Ms. Hayes is Emma's biological aunt. The law traditionally favors biological family. Linda sat up straighter. On the other hand, we have a man with unlimited resources but a history of choosing work over family. A man who lost his daughter and, some might argue, bears responsibility for that loss through his choices. Marcus closed his eyes. They were going to give Emma to Linda. After everything they were, however, his eyes snapped open. I have also reviewed something the prosecutor's office did not include in their motion. Over the past 3 weeks, Marcus Sterling has lost his position as CEO of the company he built. He lost it because he refused to prioritize business over Emma. He chose to lose everything he'd spent 20 years building rather than miss a single bedtime story. Judge Mitchell looked directly at Marcus. That Mr. Sterling is not the action of a man who hasn't learned from his mistakes. That is the action of a father. She turned to her papers. The court recognizes that biology matters, but the court also recognizes that being a parent is not about genetics. It's about showing up. It's about choosing a child every single day, even when that choice costs you everything else. The gavel was in her hand. Marcus couldn't breathe. The court grants full legal custody to Marcus Sterling with the recommendation that adoption proceedings begin immediately. Judge Mitchell continued, her voice measured. Ms. Hayes, you retain the right to supervise visitation should you complete substance abuse treatment and parenting classes. I want to add something. The door is not permanently closed. If you genuinely want to be part of Emma's life, if you're willing to do the work to get well, that possibility exists. But it must be about Emma's welfare, not your convenience. Linda stood, her face flushed. For a moment, Marcus thought she might explode again. But something in the judge's words seemed to penetrate. She looked at Emma, really looked at her, and her expression cracked. Linda's voice broke. I'm sorry I'm not better. Sarah deserved better. You deserve better. Then she turned and left, not in rage this time, but in defeat. The gavel fell. Just like that, with one wooden strike, Emma became his. The courtroom erupted, but Marcus heard none of it. He only heard Emma's voice, small and wondering. We won. We won. Forever. Forever and always. Catherine smiled the satisfied smile of victory well earned, but she pulled Marcus aside before they left. That was unusual, what the judge said to Linda. She's leaving the door open for reconciliation, if Linda gets help. What are the chances? Marcus asked. Catherine shrugged. People surprise you sometimes. But for now, Emma is yours. Adoption proceedings will take about 6 months. Congratulations. Outside the courthouse, snow had begun to fall again, soft flakes drifting down like blessings. Marcus lifted Emma into his arms, and she wrapped herself around him like she'd never let go. We're really a family now, she whispered. We were always a family. Now it's just official. They stood on the courthouse steps, watching the city transform beneath its white shroud. People passed by, strangers living their own stories, unaware that they were witnessing a miracle. A man who'd lost everything finding what mattered most. A little girl who had survived the impossible discovering she wasn't alone anymore. Marcus? Emma said softly. Yes, sweetheart. Thank you for choosing me. Marcus felt tears sting his eyes. Thank you for choosing me back. They walked to the car through the falling snow, father and daughter, bound not by blood, but by something stronger. Choice, commitment, love forged in the fires of loss and tempered by the courage to try again. The city sparkled around them, a million lights promising hope to anyone brave enough to believe. And for the first time in 20 years, Marcus Sterling believed. 6 months later, closure, the adoption finalization hearing was scheduled for July 20th, a hot summer day that made the city shimmer with heat. Emma wore her yellow dress, now properly fitted, her hair longer and healthier. She carried a folder containing her report card, all A's and B's proudly displayed. Marcus held her hand as they walked into the courthouse, the same building where their battle had been fought. But this time there was no tension, just anticipation. Judge Mitchell smiled when they entered. "Welcome back. I've been following your case. The reports from Patricia Kim are glowing." The proceeding was brief, almost anticlimactic after the drama of January. Character witnesses spoke, Dr. Ross from the hospital, Janet Morrison from CPS, even Marcus's former CFO, who testified that Marcus had never been happier or more focused than he was now. Documents were signed, and then Judge Mitchell said the words that made it official. "Marcus Sterling, you are hereby granted full adoption of Emma Grace Sterling. Emma, from this moment forward, you are Emma Grace Calloway Sterling." Marcus had insisted on keeping Sterling in her name. "It's who your mother was," he told Emma. "It's part of you. We don't erase that. We honor it." After the hearing, as they walked out into the summer heat, Marcus's phone rang. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, but something made him answer. "Mr. Sterling, this is Linda Hayes." Marcus stopped, his hand tightening on Emma's. "Miss Hayes, I wanted you to know I finished the program, 90 days sober. I'm not asking for anything. I don't deserve anything. I just wanted to say thank you for saving her. And I'm sorry. Tell Emma I'm sorry." The line went dead. Marcus stood there, phone in hand, processing. Emma looked up at him. Was that her? Yes. What did she want? To apologize. She's getting help. Emma was quiet for a moment, then, "Do you think she'll get better?" "I don't know, but she's trying. That's something." Emma nodded slowly. "Mommy always said everyone deserves a chance to get better. Even if it's too late for them to be in your life, they can still get better for themselves." Marcus pulled her close. "Your mother was very wise." They walked home through the summer streets, father and daughter, legally and permanently. Marcus had started a new venture, a foundation dedicated to helping children aging out of foster care, named after Sarah Sterling. It gave him purpose without consuming him. More importantly, it let him be home every night for dinner, for homework help, for the thousand small moments that made a family. That evening, Emma asked if they could go somewhere special. "Where?" Marcus asked. "You'll see." She directed him through the city, to Fifth Avenue, to the spot where the big tree stood at Christmas. In summer, it was just an empty plaza, but Emma stood in the center and closed her eyes. "I'm making a wish," she said. "What are you wishing for?" Emma opened her eyes, smiling. "That all the kids who don't have families find someone like you, someone who will choose them." Marcus knelt down, eye to eye with his daughter. "That's a beautiful wish. And you know what? We can help make it come true. Through the foundation, through telling our story." "Really?" "Really. Starting next Christmas, we'll come back here and we'll help other kids, just like someone helped you." Emma threw her arms around his neck. "I love you, Dad." Dad. Not Marcus, not Mr. Sterling, Dad. "I love you too, Emma, forever and always." Epilogue. 1 year later. Christmas Eve arrived with fresh snow. The city transformed once again into a winter wonderland. Marcus and Emma stood beneath the tree on Fifth Avenue, bundled in warm coats, watching the lights dance. "Do you remember last year?" Emma asked, now 7.5, taller and more confident. "Every detail. I was so scared, so cold. I thought I was going to die." Marcus pulled her close. "But you didn't. You wished to see the lights, and you survived. And I found you. We found each other." They stood in comfortable silence, watching families pass by, children pointing at decorations, couples holding hands. The Sarah Sterling Foundation had helped place 12 children in permanent homes this year. Marcus and Emma had met each one, shared their story, offered hope that families could be built from choice as much as from blood. Then Emma stiffened, her hand tightening in Marcus's. "Dad, do you hear that?" Marcus listened. There, from a nearby alley, came a sound, crying, quiet but distinct. They looked at each other, then moved toward the sound. In the alley, they found a boy, perhaps 4 years old, clutching a torn teddy bear, shivering in clothes too thin for the cold. Emma approached carefully, remembering her own fear from a year ago. "Hi, I'm Emma. Are you lost?" The boy looked up with frightened eyes. "Can't find, can't find." "It's okay," Emma said gently, using the same tone Marcus had used with her. "You're not lost anymore. We found you." She looked at Marcus, her eyes shining with purpose. He was already pulling out his phone to call for help, but he knew this was about more than just tonight. This was about continuing what Sarah Sterling had started, what Emma had taught him. "What's your name?" Emma asked the boy. "Jamie." "Well, Jamie, would you like to see the tree? The big one with all the lights? It's magic, you know. It brings families together." As they walked toward the illuminated tree, Jamie's hand in Emma's and Emma's in Marcus's, snow began to fall. Soft and steady, it covered their footprints, but the path forward was clear. The Sterling family had grown by one more heart, and somewhere in the lights above, Sarah smiled, knowing her daughter had understood the most important lesson. Love multiplies when you share it. Marcus carried Jamie toward the warmth of Mount Sinai, Emma walking beside him, Bunny tucked under her arm. She'd brought him along, knowing somehow that they might find someone who needed comfort. They'd spend hours ensuring Jamie was healthy, speaking with police and social workers. Another lost child in a city full of them. But not lost anymore. "Can we help him?" Emma whispered as they rode in the ambulance, Jamie wrapped in Marcus's coat just as she had been a year ago. "We'll do everything we can," Marcus promised. "Good, because that's what family does. Family finds people who need finding." She was right, as she so often was. And Marcus Sterling, who'd thought his life was over 20 years ago when he lost Lily, discovered that life had simply been waiting. Waiting for a snowy night. Waiting for a little girl who believed in wishes. Waiting for him to remember that the best gifts are the ones we give away. The lights of Manhattan continued their eternal dance. Millions of lives intersecting and separating. But in the warm spaces between heartbeats, two lives, now three, had joined permanently, bound not by blood, but by something stronger. Choice, commitment, love, and the promise to pass it forward, one found soul at a time. Because some families are born, others are built. And the strongest ones are those we choose again and again in the face of every obstacle, until choice becomes permanence, and permanence becomes forever. The snow fell like promises kept, covering the city in grace. And beneath the lights of Fifth Avenue, the Sterling family stood together. Father, daughter, and soon perhaps a son, proving that miracles still happen to those brave enough to believe. That Christmas wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. And the story continues, written in bedtime lullabies and morning pancakes, in scraped knees bandaged and nightmares soothed, in laughter echoing through rooms that once knew only silence. Marcus Sterling had built an empire and lost it, but in losing everything, he'd gained what he'd been searching for all along. A family, a purpose, a home. And every Christmas Eve, they would return to the spot, looking for shadows that might hide lost souls, because they knew something the rest of the world was still learning. Love doesn't divide when you share it, it multiplies.